everybody.
Good evening.
How are you all tonight? Good. Thank you all very much indeed for coming. It's great to see people from all areas of the constituency and from Orkney. Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming. We've even got a member of Kelvin branch here tonight, Victoria, so you're all very welcome indeed for the Hustings, for the Depute Leader campaign for the SNP. Now, it's, I would argue, never been a more important point to have strong leadership within our party. We're very fortunate indeed to have 4 strong candidates to compete for that role, and they will obviously be elected by the membership of the party. 120,000 members in our party now, heading towards 125. We are not far behind the Conservative Party across the whole of the UK. And of course, very recently we have had the Brexit vote, so that's going to be an enormous issue for the people of Scotland and the Scottish National Party in the weeks, months and years ahead. And we might even have another independence referendum campaign. Who can tell? Who can tell? So, a couple of things I'd like to say just before we get going. 4 excellent candidates. They're going to have 5 minutes each to talk at the beginning. It's been done in alphabetical order. Then we will have some questions from the floor. We'll have about an hour for questions. Then each candidate will have 2 minutes to sum up, and then that will be the end of the evening. So it's a really exciting time. So get your thinking caps on. You clearly won't all be able to ask a question, but I suspect that we'll get a few interesting ones in. The ballot for this campaign opens on the 21st of September, so just a few days' time, and it closes on the 12th of October, just ahead of the national conference at which the winner will be announced, and they will then take up the role as the Deputy Leader of the SNP. I would just like to say before we get going, a very special thanks to Tain branch for organising this room and for decorating it with the national flag of Scotland so beautifully. We can always rely on Tain branch to do a great job, so thank you very much to Tain for doing that. If you would like to make a small donation to help with the cost of the room, that would be very welcome, and they'll be happy to take your money, I'm sure. They will also be happy to sell you a raffle ticket, or several raffle tickets in fact, and we will draw the raffle at the end of the evening. Does that sound like a plan, everybody? Yeah. Okay, good. So we'll get straight on with it. So the first speaker is going to be Chris. Now, Chris is the leader of the opposition on Inverclyde Council, and a very strong candidate for this particular role, and we're very much looking forward to what you have to say, Chris. So 5 minutes, please.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having me to Tain. I was just joking to Tommy that this is the furthest north I've shamefully actually been in Scotland, so my apologies for that. But thank you for allowing me to be part of this contest to get to such magnificent places such as Tain. So I'm acutely aware that some of the chaps up here, you certainly know Paul, your hard-working MP, you know Angus, one of your nearby MPs, we're leader in Westminster, you probably know Tommy and you probably also know Alyn, but you likely don't know who I am. So I'm a councillor from the west of Scotland, a place called Inverclyde. It's a small authority, one of the smallest in Scotland, nowhere near the size of this authority area, the largest of course geographically in Scotland. I was elected a councillor in 2012 and I became the council group leader for the SNP in Inverclyde, so I've been a group leader across Scotland at a council level since 2013. So, I mean, there's no surprise then that local government is the reason I'm up in Tain today to talk to you, because I think local government's important, and I think it's something that we as a party need to get a better grasp of going forward to start delivering for Scotland. So we all know we lost the referendum in 2014. But after the referendum, we had challenges in front of us if we wanted to keep that independent stream alive. The first one of those was to grow as a party. We saw immediately the SNP, tens of thousands of members came to the Party of Independence. And then we moved on to 2015, with the challenge of returning a majority of SNP MPs for the first time in Scottish history to represent Scotland at the UK Parliament, and we did that. We elected 56 SNP MPs out of 59. We were unlucky, of course, in places such as Orkney and Edinburgh and other parts of Scotland not to win all 59. Such was the sense of feeling in Scotland of how annoyed people were that the UK establishment had deprived us of our independence, but of course we never won the argument, but we progressed it by winning that vote in 2015. And then we moved on to 2016. We had the challenge of returning Nicola Sturgeon as our country's First Minister and returning an SNP majority government. We never managed that, but we managed 1 million votes, a record. The highest ever amount of constituency votes. Don't let anybody tell you that wasn't a success, that was clearly a success. And then on the 23rd of June, Alyn and our team across Scotland took the question of Europe to the country. And across all 32 local authority areas, we won the case for Europe. Now there might be people in this room that voted Remain, there might be some that voted Leave, but the point is the democratic deficit that vote highlighted. That it didn't matter what Scotland voted as a whole, it was the vote of the rest of the United Kingdom that dragged Scotland out. So if you did vote to leave the EU, I would ask you to consider the fact that the workers' legislation, the maternity rights, those things that Europe protected, where do you trust them better? In the hands of Theresa May in London or the hands of Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland? So as we move on towards independence, what is the next challenge? The next step in the march to independence is winning local authorities across Scotland in the 4th of May election next May. And I think we can do that, that's a challenge we can meet. But if we reflect on the position in 2012, we had a majority government in Scotland. We won 900,000 votes at a constituency level to elect that majority government. But in 2012 we won a majority in only 2 out of 32 local authorities in Scotland. You'll know that yourself. We don't run this council, many councils across the country we don't win. So we can put more emphasis on local government by being the first party in Scotland, the first party in Britain, indeed the first party in Europe to elect a councillor, a grassroots activist for the community at the very heart of our party, championing local government at that level. And for me, I think that's a great thing. But why do we just stop there? It's not just about electing a councillor to send out a message which will probably give us some sort of bounce in the vote in the elections. It's about delivering for communities, because we won't win independence if we control councils across this country. And when we go to people, we ask them to put their trust in us to run the country, they say they can't run the roads, you can't run the schools, you can't run the healthcare. So we've got to get it right at a council level, and we need someone with that knowledge at the heart of the party, making sure we get it right for Scotland, at the heart of Scotland. A new partnership, a new strategic leadership of Nicola Sturgeon running the country and the party from Edinburgh, and a local councillor as Depute Leader speaking from the 32 local authorities in Scotland. To me that makes sense. I think it makes more sense than stretching our leadership team from Edinburgh to London or from Edinburgh to Brussels. That's why I'm in this contest, because I believe that you as members should have a louder voice in setting the direction of our party, and I believe that local government should have a louder voice in Scotland going forward, because when we work in partnership between Scottish councils and the Scottish Government going forward, that's how I think we will win independence. So I would ask you to consider giving local government and giving me your first preference vote in this contest. Thank you.
That was exactly 5 minutes. Well done. Our second speaker is Angus Robertson. Angus is the Member of Parliament for Murray, and he's also the group leader at Westminster. So Tommy and myself know him very well, perhaps too well sometimes. I'll hand over to Angus. Angus, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Well, first off, I'm going to make no assumptions that you know anything about me. So as Paul says, I'm the Member of Parliament for Murray and have been that since 2001. I've been the leader of the SNP in the House of Commons since 2007, and it's been a tremendous experience of having great new colleagues like Paul, like Tommy, the more than 50 SNP MPs at Westminster, and don't tell anybody, to also have the ability to delegate. Which is a change from when there was only 6 of us and we had to do everything ourselves. It has totally transformed our ability to fight Scotland's corner in the House of Commons, and I'm hugely appreciative to all my colleagues for everything that they do. What is this election about? Well, firstly, it's about electing the Depute Leader of the SNP. So it perhaps makes sense to understand what is the job of the Depute Leader of the SNP. At our meetings, we've been struck by the percentage, the high percentage of people at these meetings who are new members. Do you mind me asking, how many of you joined since 2014? Relatively new members. There you go. It's about half. It's about half, 60% in all of the meetings that we're doing, and people ask all kinds of questions about what does a Deputy Leader do? Why can't we just have 4 Deputy Leaders? But we only have one. And the job of the Depute Leader is to work closely with our leader, Nicola Sturgeon, to be there when she needs help, when she needs assistance, when she needs to discuss tactics and strategy. You need to be there to work with the leader. That's the primary part of the job, but there's plenty other things besides. You have to be on the National Executive Committee of the party. You have to be on the Standing Orders and Agenda Committee of the party. You're responsible for making sure that the manifesto is everything that it needs to be there. But in the first instance, you're there to work with and for the party leader. Now, you're going to hear a lot from all of us saying how much we want to update our organisation, because we must. We're now a party of 120,000, not just 20,000. You're going to hear strong reasons why we need to make sure that we win in local government, that our local government colleagues are treated properly and not forgotten to be the Cinderella service of the SNP. And we agree on that. And you're going to hear why Europe is really important. And the Brexit vote, in fact, is what persuaded me to put my name forward, given that I think we are coming towards another independence referendum. All of those things are important, but they are not the primary job of the Depute Leader of the SNP. And the reason I know that is before deciding that I would run, I spoke to the First Minister about what she required in a Depute Leader. I also spoke with Stuart Hosey, who is the outgoing Depute Leader, to understand not just what the rules say, but the custom and practice of this role over recent times. So I understand very well what Nicola Sturgeon needs. And it seems to me that in the first instance, you need somebody with experience and track record. Somebody who's actually run national campaigns for the SNP and won. And I've done that. In 2007 and 2011, I was a national campaign director for the SNP. And in 2014, the referendum where we came so close. I've also been the party's business convener, the chairman of the party, chairing the National Executive Committee, chairing the National Conference, chairing the National Council. So I know how the party works. So if you want somebody with experience, if you want somebody with track record, I would suggest that you vote for me. There are other reasons why I think it makes perfect sense to have the leadership of the SNP to reflect the party and the country. The leadership of the SNP in the Scottish Parliament and Government by Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of the SNP in the House of Commons, myself. The two people who are probably most in the spotlight on behalf of the SNP. It seems to me that that is a perfect partnership. And there's a reason that should really matter to you as much as it does to me, which is that the leadership of this party should reflect the country. Not just urban Central Belt Scotland, but also the rest. And the rest is here, the rest is in Murray, the rest is in North East Fife, in West Aberdeenshire, in Galloway, incidentally seats where we recently lost. We should never, ever, ever lose sight of the fact that we broke through in rural Scotland, urban Scotland caught up, and we are now in danger unless we work properly to defend the rural gains that we have made. So if you want a leadership team reflecting urban Scotland and rural Scotland, Westminster and the Scottish Parliament, if you want the most experienced candidate who actually understands what the job is, has spoken to the party leader about what she requires, I would suggest that you vote Angus, number 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angus, and that was exactly 5 minutes as well. Pressure's building, isn't it? Our third candidate is Tommy Sheppard, Member of Parliament for Edinburgh East, and Tommy is also the party's spokesperson on the Cabinet Office at Westminster. Tommy, 5 minutes, please.
Good evening, everyone. I want to explain in the next 5 minutes why I'm standing for this position. And it's basically because I am excited and inspired by the political opportunities which now present themselves to us. The last few years have been ones of tremendous change in the politics of Scotland. Fresh ideas have emerged, old allegiances have died. And the thing that has what struck me is the coming together of Scotland's radical traditions throughout the country in a way that hasn't been seen perhaps for 100 years. The campaign for national autonomy, self-government independence on the one hand, and the campaign for social equality and social justice on the other. The thing that brought them together was the independence referendum campaign of 2014. Because in that campaign, those who said, should Scotland be an independent country, found themselves being asked all sorts of other questions, like, what sort of country would that be? And they invariably replied saying, we want a Scotland which is fairer, more equal, more tolerant, more compassionate, more outward-looking than the country which we have today. And likewise, many people who for generations had put their faith in the Labour Party understood and saw through the lies of those Labour leaders when they said constitutional politics and independence is a distraction from the campaign for social equality. In fact, they realised that it was the way to achieve their ambition and the things they had long wanted. Now, we didn't win the referendum campaign. We mark its second anniversary just tomorrow, in fact. But the legacy of that campaign is vast. As Chris has said, we have had tens of thousands of people join our party, anxious to be part of the campaign for progressive change in our country. We've had tremendous electoral success. And we now have a situation, I believe, to do something quite remarkable. And I want to get our party match fit to be able to lead and win the next independence referendum so that we can achieve the goal of self-government and becoming a modern European nation. But to do that, I think we need to change. We need to galvanise our new membership. We need to consolidate those political changes. And I don't believe that that can be done with the manual that we had for an organisation of 20,000 people. I believe we need an organisational upgrade. We need to change the way that we do things in order to involve many, many more of our members in an active political process. Starting with branches, I would like to refocus branches so that they discuss politics front and centre, because that's why people join political parties, and we remove the boring bits and the administration and the internal reports and the interpersonal disputes that are there conducted by people who've forgotten even what they fell out about. We take all that out of the meetings and we focus them on the politics. We train, we inspire, we educate our membership to be much more involved. But here's the thing, I don't think that that'll happen just by wishing for it or exhorting people to do it. I think we need to make it happen. And we are a big enough organisation now that we have to invest in more full-time staff to be able to back up the efforts of voluntary organisers on the ground. Because we're too big and our mission is too vast just to be left to the voluntary efforts of people who already lead very busy lives. So I want to see more organising staff, and I want to see them based not just at headquarters, but in regional offices throughout the country, under the control of local members, providing backup and support all year round so that we can be the campaigning organisation we know we can be, and we can realise our potential. I think you have an opportunity in this election to do one amazing thing, which is to expand the leadership team in the SNP. We already have great leaders in this party. We have Angus Robertson, Nicola Sturgeon, John Swinney, but you have the opportunity now to put somebody else into that leadership team. And I hope that you will choose me, and I would hope to bring a fresh perspective to that. I have 40 years experience in politics, but I also have a new, fresh perspective of looking at how we organise ourselves and how we can be better. So please, when you get the ballot paper on Wednesday, vote Tommy Sheppard, number 1.
Thank you very much, Tommy. That was exactly 5 minutes as well. Our final candidate is Alyn Smith. Alyn is a member of the European Parliament, covering the whole of Scotland. I sometimes think I've got a very big constituency, as does Marie Todd and Kate Forbes, but I think Alyn takes the biscuit with the whole of Scotland. At the European Parliament, Alyn is heavily involved in foreign affairs, which is clearly an issue at this particular point in our history. Alyn, 5 minutes, please.
Well, thanks very much, and thank you all for coming along on a sunny Saturday evening when you could be doing other things with your day. It's great to see so many familiar faces, to be back in Tain. I wanted to come along to thank you for the support that I've had from this neck of the woods, and to thank you for the efforts that you put in to secure a victory in the EU referendum recently. It was a tough campaign, but we got it there. We won across the length and breadth of Scotland, and Scotland clearly wants something different out of whatever Brexit is going to be. And that's why I'm putting myself forward. We live in extraordinary times. Now is not the time for politics as usual. Now is not the time for business as usual. We have got an extraordinary opportunity as a movement and as a nation and as a party, because Brexit has changed everything. In 2014, in the first independence referendum, a number of people in Scotland, a number of good, decent, thoughtful people in Scotland voted no, because they weren't persuaded by our arguments on the European question. Likewise, a number of people across the wider European continent didn't quite get the why of independence, because we did not prepare the ground across the other European states. One of the big lessons of 2014 for me is that we spent too much time speaking to the world via London, via Westminster, via the London embassies, via the London correspondents of the international media. And they looked at us with London's eyes. I've shown you what we can win by speaking to the world directly with Scotland's voice in Brussels, via the Brussels media, the Brussels MEPs. I can be the free-roaming ambassador for Scotland to prepare the ground for whatever is in Scotland's future going forward. And we don't know what that's going to be, but Scotland, I believe, now has the map that's going to deliver Scotland's independence. Who voted leave, who voted yes, who voted no, who voted remain, everyone is going to be impacted by what Brexit is as Brexit comes forward. Brexit hasn't started yet. And we need to prove to ourselves, the people of Scotland, the people of the UK, the London government, and the wider world, that at a time when the Westminster parties would rather we shut up and eat our cereal and let London speak for us, that we choose Europe as our future and that Westminster is our past. I can do that. I can continue what I have done since 2004, representing the whole of Scotland in the European Parliament. 2004 seems a long time ago, but I have been travelling the length and breadth of Scotland. I was coming through Murray, as we were all in Aberdeen this morning, I thought, Murray's a beautiful bit of my constituency. It must be great to represent such a lovely part of the whole country I've represented since 2004. And I've travelled about. There isn't a constituency I've not worked in, there isn't a branch I haven't assisted. I work with all levels of the party everywhere. And Chris is absolutely right. The coming challenge is local government elections, and we do need to prioritise local government more. But Brexit has changed the political weather. So I can continue that discussion nationwide, the length and breadth of Scotland, and I can be the free-roaming ambassador for our leader, our party, and our cause in the wider world. I'm not a member of the Scottish Parliament, I'm not a member of the Scottish Government, that's the point. We have a great, cracking team in our government and our MSPs. I'm not a member of the Westminster Parliament, that's the point as well. I'm supportive of both institutions, but I'm independent of both. And I can leave the Westminster team and the government team to get on with actually doing the job while taking something different for extraordinary times. Because I don't know what's in my future either. Brexit has pretty significantly altered my workload as well. But so long as I have a role, so long as I have a duty to Scotland, I will fulfil that duty. And as Depute, I can do that more effectively, with more authority, symbolically and practically. We also need to be open to change how we work as a party. I've been an activist nationwide, so I've seen a lot of good practice, and I've seen a few places where we're not quite there. We need to discuss policy in different ways. Now, I would reinvent National Assembly, which we used to do, a place to discuss policy, not decide it, but 1 in 33 of the adult population of Scotland is an SNP member. We have the expertise, we have the network. We need to bring that into a place where we can discuss new ideas and then decide in the usual way. I likewise would have a network of organisers starting in Glasgow, where there is a plan good to go, winning control of Glasgow City Council, then rolling out the network as a case is made. We do need to be open to change. It's not rip it up and start again, but we do need to be open to doing things differently for the challenges ahead. But I told the European Parliament, Scotland did not let you down. I won't let this party down, if you'll have me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alyn. Guess what? 5 minutes exactly. Good. What we're going to do now is we've got roughly an hour for questions. So if you've got a question, what I'd ask you to do is first of all put your hand up. If you're picked, please say who you are and which branch you're a member of. And what we will try to do is take questions in groups of 3. So does anybody have a question for the candidates? So Kate first, I think, yeah?
Stand up.
Yes, please.
I'm Kate Forbes and I'm a member of the Dingwall branch. Now, thank you very much for your speeches. Whilst a majority of Scots voted to remain, there were still a significant proportion that voted to leave. How do you understand the reasons they voted to leave, and how can we position ourselves as a party that will stand up for their concerns?
Thank you, Kate. And then I know you're from Orkney. Your question?
I'm McEleny from Orkney. In the last referendum, we made a lot of mistakes. What one thing would you change and get in place before we have our next independence referendum?
Question, thank you. And then there's another question. Yes?
Broadcasting. What's the panel's view of our own broadcasting, because we were annihilated by the BBC?
Okay, thank you very much. Tommy, maybe we can start with you. So we've got the whole issue about remain and leave. We've got the indirect referendum, what would you change? And then we've got broadcasting, and I suspect the implication was bias in the BBC.
Yeah, I've got that implication. Okay, well, Brexit first of all. So yes, I mean, look, I don't think we can afford to be complacent about this. The polls pretty much show that SNP supporters voted in line with the rest of Scotland. In other words, 38% of them voted to leave the European Union. Now, they will have done that for a range of different reasons. I think some people will have thought that that was a route to better independence, because they could take all the powers back and they didn't want to share them with other European countries in the European Union. And that somehow was preferable to being within the United Kingdom. But that wasn't, of course, the option on the ballot paper. They weren't being given the option of having an independent Scotland, not in the EU. They were being given the option of being part of the UK, taking an isolationist and separatist approach from the EU. So I think we need to argue that with them. But the most important thing is something Chris touched on earlier, which is we need to go back to first principles and argue about the democratic case for this. Because the question isn't whether you are for or against the European Union. That shouldn't be on the ballot paper next time we consult people on their independence. Personally, I'm in favour of the European Union, but I think there are big changes that need to be made in it, and I regret very much being part of a country that's actually not really participated or tried to change Europe and has sat there curmudgeonly the whole time of its membership just complaining. But it's not about whether you're for or against the EU, it's about who decides whether Scotland should be in the European Union. Should that be the people who live in Scotland, or should that be the people who live in a different country? And I think that is the beginning and end of it. And I would like to hope that I can convince the people who voted to leave, the Brexiteers, who also support independence, that they should still support independence, because the democratic case is paramount. And the question that will be put will be that, you know, do you want an independent Scotland with all of the international arrangements that it has at the minute, including the EU? But the point about independence is that you can then go on to review and change everything, including your relationship with the European Union, if it doesn't work. But I think people would find a Scotland, an independent Scotland within the EU, being a much better prospect than having to constantly be seen and organised through the prism of Westminster, where we quite often get a very bad deal. In terms of referendum mistakes, well, in a sense, we need to completely press the reset button for next time. We can't just assume. I mean, this is not a matter of asking the same question again, okay? Because if we ask the same question again, we'll probably get the same answer, and there's no point in doing that. We need to learn from what worked last time in terms of the offer that we made to people and what didn't work. We also need to revise things just to take account of the fact that we are 4 years on from the last time we looked at the white paper. The world has changed, not least to do with Brexit, so things are going to have to be upgraded. But if you wanted me to pick one thing, the thing I would pick most of all is this. I think the argument that we were vulnerable to and that we didn't engage with enough was us being labelled as separatists by wanting to control our own country. And I think we need to say loud and clear that the purpose of gaining our independence is not just to make Scotland better, but to be able to play a much fuller role in the management and governance of these islands, this continent and this world. As Winnie Ewing once said, stop the world, we want to get on. So that is really the argument that I think we need to put to counteract the notion that somehow we are isolationists and want to put up bridges and barriers. And on the BBC, my colleague John Nicholson, just before the summer break, was successful in calling out John Whittingdale, the former UK Culture Secretary. And this is in Hansard, where Whittingdale basically says that he regards the BBC, one of the roles of the BBC, to be to uphold the Union. Now, that might be a plausible case in Surrey or wherever John Whittingdale's from, but in a country where, shall we say, opinion on that is divided, that is not a non-partisan position. And if that attitude frames the ethos that BBC Scotland has in order to report the news to us and to frame its editorial policy, then we need to call them out on that. So it's not just a matter of setting up our own broadcasting corporation, it's a matter of saying it's our money. That is a service that people in Scotland are meant to be receiving, and they're not going to fund it in order to have a bias driven down their throat every night in the TV screen. So we need to renew our efforts, I think, to try and insist that BBC Scotland operates within a neutral political framework rather than one that has preconceptions about what is good and what is bad. Thank you, Tommy.
Chris next, please.
Every candidate up here, I believe, voted to remain in Europe, so I don't think that's any reason for anybody to vote in a particular way, because we all voted the same way. So I think what's important is we need to actually accept the world we live in. The United Kingdom is leaving Europe. So as I mentioned earlier, what does Europe actually do at the moment for Britain in terms of what protections does it give us? It gives us a right to time off, it gives us maternity rights, it gives us health and safety legislation, it gives us all these things that workers rely on every single day. So if you voted to leave, the question you now have to ask yourself is, where do you want those powers to lie? Do you want them to lie in London, with the most right-wing government in a generation, or do you want those powers to come to Scotland? And the only way they'll come to Scotland is through independence. So if you're thinking, well, perhaps I don't want to vote for independence anymore because I would rather stay part of the UK out with Europe, then I think you need to ask yourself, which of those would you rather? A progressive Scotland that protects workers' legislation and protects all the things that Europe has protected for decades, or a United Kingdom out with Europe with Theresa May with her hands on those policies? So I think that's the narrative going forward. It's about self-determination to make our own decisions, and we all agree on quite a lot of things you maybe picked up tonight. Tommy's right what he's saying, it's like nothing changes when you vote for independence except
The power to change everything.
The power to change everything. You know what I mean? So if in an independent Scotland, the people of Scotland want a referendum on Europe, we can have that. And the people of Scotland can make their voices heard whether they want to stay a member of Europe or whether they want to leave it. But the point is, we should make the decision, not people in Wales and England, and have that imposed upon us. Emily, to your question, what one thing would have changed about the referendum? The result, obviously. I think we all agree on that one. But I think that the pensions was a key argument. I think, what is the point of independence if we want to just take the institutions and the policies of the United Kingdom and mimic them in Scotland? Now, I think we have to get pensions right for the pensioners of today and the pensioners of tomorrow. My state retirement age is 68. It's a disgrace. Life expectancy in Inverclyde isn't even 68, but that's my state retirement pension age. So I think we need to offer the pensioners of today something that they can actually want to buy into, because many pensioners perhaps, the world's okay, it's part of the United Kingdom, so why bother voting for change when it's okay just now? So I think we need to be bolder. We need to have a state retirement age that actually allows people to have a decent retirement. We need to restore the pensions that have been robbed from women in this country, women that thought they'd be retiring at the age of 60 and they're now going to need to retire at the age of 66 or 67 or 68. Of independence, because we can make decisions on pensions, our currency, or the economy, our taxation that suit the needs of people in Scotland, not the needs of the south east of England, where the current immigration policy or the current pensions policy or the current housing policy, that's what they're made to suit. So we take the powers into our own hands. Pensions would be the first one that would change in terms of offering pensioners today something they actually vote for, and actually offering young people a pension, because many young people won't even see a pension. They'll work for a company that doesn't give them a final salary pension. Some people in here perhaps get one of them. That's a pipe dream to young people these days. The state retirement age and the state pension is the only realistic future young people have got in terms of savings, because they certainly can't afford to save at the moment, because they can't afford a house, because mortgages are the highest they've ever been, because Thatcher sold off the property, she forgot to replace it with new builds, so they're paying astronomical rents. So we've got to tie it in. It's not about older. Yep, the majority of under 55s, they're in favour of independence, but we don't put the older generation and the younger generation against each other. We need to make sure we're on this together towards independence. And on broadcasting, I mean, again, you probably get consensus, but the fact is we have a team of parliamentarians in Europe, in Westminster and Holyrood that can get facts out of people to rebut the nonsense and the lies that you might see in the BBC. We've got a team of over 400 councillors, hopefully over 600 councillors as of next year, getting facts out into communities. But all of those numbers are far outweighed with the 120,000 members we have in this party. 120,000 members who can see the lies in the press or on the TV and get the facts to people. So that's communication. We need better communication lines for the party at the moment, so that if we've got policies such as named persons, a good policy, I know the policy, but how many people in here felt they were confident enough to go to the doorsteps and tell people, this is a good policy, here's the facts on it. I mean, up this part of the world we have named persons. Argyll and Bute, we have named persons. It works. It works for families, it works for children, it works for the schools. But the media presented it as a bad policy. We never did the facts, we never did the communication to actually get that out to members. So how do we rebut the BBC or the right-wing press by getting the facts to members? A weekly email, a weekly letter, a wee updating policy, and it then gives you the tools to take to the doorsteps to win the argument. And we win the argument, we win elections. We win elections, we get another referendum, and we get another referendum with the arguments, we win independence.
Alyn?
Surely, starting with Kate's point about leave voters, it's close to my heart. 38% of the people of Scotland did vote to leave the European Union. And we must be sensitive and respectful of that, because we're all Democrats. And I think there is an ongoing discussion that needs to be had there. Now, there's an ongoing discussion because a number of people voted leave on the basis of specific promises. And I believe that if you give people facts and information, you can trust people as rational beings to make a decision. How many of you remember this from the referendum? You can judge me by my actions, I've done it. How many of you get my Friday emails in Scotland and Europe? A few of you. We're putting together every Friday an update on what's going on over in the continental media, the continental news sources. I have to say there's not a lot of jokes in it, but it's people keeping people informed about what's going on. Because I went to Shetland to go and take on the fishing argument that you'll often hear. And where we actually took on the EU argument, we won significantly. The EU referendum campaign, there was bits of Scotland where there wasn't a campaign worth the name. Now that's down to the timing, it's down to all sorts of other stuff. It was a star-crossed exercise. We still won, but there were parts where we needed to do more, and we need to continue that discussion, because a number of Leave voters voted Leave on the basis of promises they were made. Yeah, the £350 million to the NHS. It was on the side of the bus and everything, you know. Some people were told on a nightly basis by the BBC, and I'll come on to them in a minute, that immigration was somehow a problem. Where in Scotland, it is emphatically not a problem. A number of people were told we'll get control of the fishing grounds back. The farmers will be able to get rid of all the stuff they don't like, but keep all the stuff they do. Now, all those promises, and I'm aware Jim's given me the glad eye as I'm speaking. I've been on the Agriculture Committee working with and for Scotland's farmers since 2007. And the Common Agricultural Policy has its faults, goodness me, yes it does. But without it, 1 in 3 Scottish holdings goes bankrupt. And the people who now control that are the people in Westminster. And the reason why Shetland voted so significantly to remain was because the active fishermen didn't buy UKIP snake oil. Now, I am alive to the possibility that there might be opportunities to come out of Brexit. We're the party that is best placed to take advantage of them. But the people who will make those decisions will be the Westminster government. And as those promises, one by one, are betrayed and welched on, just watch the people of Scotland who did vote Leave come to us in droves. Because we will be, as we always are, first and last and always for Scotland's best interests. I'm not pro-European because I'm pro-European. I'm pro-European because it's in Scotland's best interests, and I believe it's the best way to deliver the restoration of our national sovereignty. And if you're not persuaded by independence in Europe, how? We've never had it. Let's try it, and then it's up to the people of Scotland to decide whatever else works best. In the same way as I wouldn't make independence contingent upon a republic or a monarchy or any other issue, I believe independence in Europe is the way that we can change the weather within Scotland while we get the case together, which is my response to Emily, that two things I'd change, and it's not about Indie Ref 2. Stop talking about Indie Ref 2. That suggests to people that we're going to do the same thing again. It's Indie Ref New. It's a new proposition for a new time. The world has changed a lot, and I tell you, the world is going to change a lot in the coming months and years, which is why you need someone front and centre on the European question who can actually maintain the focus on it, while the other guys get on with their very, very, very important jobs. I'll be able to maintain focus on Brexit. Travelling nationwide to discuss it with people who may have been unpersuaded, but I believe are there to be persuaded, and making sure that we're vocal within this process. So there's two things I would change. Firstly, how we discuss policy, and I think National Assembly would bring people into that discussion. One of the lessons for me about the White Paper, it was a great document, it was a cracking piece of work, but we could have involved the party more in its preparation. I think that's a lesson that we can do in terms of discussing policy in National Assembly and then taking that forward for decision via National Council, National Conference. I'd also prepare the ground, because one of the big chills that we had to the independence proposition was the reaction from other European capitals. There was a chilly indifference, and that was privately. There would be support. I have no doubt that once we voted yes, everyone would have been realistic and pragmatic. All of that has inverted utterly. We can be the good news story that a European Union that really needs one needs. So as Brexit comes and emerges from the fog, I believe we've got an incredible opportunity. And it's up to us to refine our policies and to refine how we discuss them and promote them. Which brings me on to the BBC. I've got pals who are BBC journalists. I was over in Dublin a few weeks back and I did some interviews with RTE, the Irish national broadcaster. And they are an Irish national broadcaster. They view their job as explaining the world to the people of Ireland with an Irish perspective. There's not many people in BBC Scotland view that as their role. They view themselves as provincial journalists. They've downshifted to the provinces. And that's what we need to change, and that's where party policy is exactly where we need to be, that we need a Scottish Broadcast Commission which will be able to use the licence fee, spend it in Scotland and commission proper Scottish content internationally. But I obsess less and less about the media, because look at the results we've achieved by stepping round them, by actually discussing directly with people. 1 in 33, I'll say it again, of the adult population of Scotland is an SNP member. There wasn't many people who actually got their hands on one of these who voted leave. We're keeping that resource going at www.scotlandineurope.eu to inform the discussion. We are the network. That's the sort of things that we need to do. We can activate the party's membership, and I believe that's way more powerful than any BBC. So let's worry less about the people who are against us, and let's concentrate more on the people we can persuade.
And Angus.
Thanks very much, Paul. Rather than repeating many of the good points that my colleagues have made, I prefer to concentrate on what can the Depute Leader actually do about these things. So not just what do we feel about it, or what do we think's right or wrong, but what difference me or anybody else actually being the Depute Leader will make in dealing with these important questions. So firstly, to Kate's point on leave. Well, firstly, I think we need to be absolutely honest. SNP, long-standing SNP communities like Buckie voted to leave. Fraserburgh, leave. Peterhead, leave. And unless we are aware of that fact, we are kidding ourselves about the mountain that we have to climb in some communities, particularly coastal communities. It's not just about the fishing issue, it's also in agricultural areas. It might be absolutely clear to us that people who work on the land are going to cause all kinds of damage to themselves and their prospects by leaving the European Union because the UK government will not support them. We get that. Do they get that? Well, I don't know. I was at the Keith show speaking to the NFU, and I'll be absolutely honest, most of them didn't get it. So what can a Depute Leader actually do about this? Well, if you have a leadership that is balanced between people who understand rural issues and people who understand issues that really matter in the rest of Scotland, you'll actually have the leaflets that explain it. You'll have the policy documents that will explain it. And why do you know that it will happen? Because it happened when I was in charge of it before. When we set up SNP Print, it was to have bespoke leaflets that could be used in different parts of the country. When we set up the website and the members-only section of it, it was to provide our members, our branches, our activists with information about things that were relevant right across Scotland. So I've done it before, and if you elect me, I will do it again, because we have to have the right answers and the right campaign materials. Incidentally, how many of you have received your campaign materials after the election for things? Well, I know we even had them in Murray one election too late. So there's a particular issue for us in the rest of Scotland that we have to have the relevant materials, but we also have to have them in time. So it seems to me that is something that a deputy leader who understands the realities of rural Scotland, being outside the central belt and the politics of the central belt, does matter. The mistakes and what can a deputy leader do about that? Well, in 2011 I was sent to Quebec, kind of under the radar screen, to learn the lessons of their 1995 sovereignty referendum. Given I was a campaign director, it made sense that I would go there to learn what they should do. And they weren't joking when they said the first lesson is don't lose. I mean, it sounds amusing, doesn't it? And the next thing they said is definitely don't lose a second time. And I don't know how many of you follow politics in Quebec and Canada, but since the 1995 referendum, which was their second, they are in the wilderness. And they have been split in a number of different directions, and they have no strategy that is succeeding electorally. So the most important thing, having not won the first referendum, is making sure that we don't lose the next one. And the point's already been made. It's not Indy Ref 2, it's not the same answers to what we did in 2014. We have to get the right answers for the referendum that comes up. And there are certain, seems to me, blindingly obvious things that we need to get right. The currency. I think the answer 2014 might have been right off its time. I don't think it's right now. I'm open to a Scottish pound, and there are different ways of making that happen. Really, really pleased that the First Minister has set up a growth commission which is looking, amongst other things, in fact, Kate, you're on it. Congratulations. So we know there's going to be a good job. Incidentally, along the way we've been hearing people saying that they want involvement in policy and different ways of doing that. Well, the first thing is let's celebrate it when people are involved and they're making policy and it's happening. So let's take our hat off to Kate. One of the jobs that the Deputy Leader is responsible for is the manifesto, and Stuart Hosey initiated a way in which all of us have been involved for some time now and are able to, and if I am elected Deputy Leader, I am happy to pledge to you that I will continue to do that, is have a portal for everybody to have their good suggestions fed into the manifesto process. So you're not dependent on a branch meeting that you may or may not be able to make, and particularly in this part of the world, it might be geographically quite challenging to do that, but that you can have a direct way into the policy making process, and I think that is very important. Lastly, broadcasting. Well, just let me start on a note that might make me unpopular. I was a BBC correspondent for 10 years, and I'm very proud of the fact that I did that job, largely for the BBC World Service, and of the standard of broadcasting and my colleagues that I worked with. There is a massive difference between the BBC writ large, I believe, and its media, and particularly news coverage, in particular of Scottish politics. And I think we need to separate the two things. And why do I think that's important? Well, firstly, this issue is brought up quite a lot at these meetings. And what are we going to do about the media? And what are we going to do about the BBC? And so on and so on. Well, the first thing, are we clear in our own minds that we're actually about winning friends and influencing people? That we're going to appeal to the 100% of Scotland, not just the 45% who were convinced, and many of us are angry about this, that, the next thing. So we have to think about how do we talk about and to the 55%. And understand the world in which they live in and the reasons why they're not convinced, whether they work for the BBC or whether they are anything else. And that's another part of my candidacy, if you were to elect me as Deputy Leader, front and centre of the next months and years, is that we have to think ourselves into the minds of the people that we did not convince. They weren't wrong to vote no in 2014. Is that a controversial thing to say? In their own minds, they were not wrong. So let's not speak to them as if they were. We have to win them over. And one of the things that I initiated when I was campaign director for 2007, and it worked, and then 2011 and since, sometimes, particularly on social media, we've forgotten the lesson, is that we must be relentlessly positive. Relentlessly positive. And sometimes, in the darker recesses of the social media, on our side of the political fence, we are not. We are not. And we must do everything to persuade anybody who's got an anonymous account, stop it. Or anybody that stays up too late and starts attacking other people, stop it. And let's spend more of our time reaching out and trying to convince those that we've not yet reached. Those are things that I could do as Deputy Leader of the SNP, and I would want to do it. So please vote for me so I can get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Some more questions. So, lady in the front here.
Hello, my name is Lindsay Johnston. Like Kate, I come from the glorious Dingwall branch. However, first of all, before my question, I'd like to congratulate you all on having a leadership contest and not tearing a party apart. So well done. My main question really is, with Brexit having so many different possible outcomes, and if you could all possibly shine your crystal ball, what do you think is the most likely outcome for Scotland? Joining Europe after Brexit, being able to leave the UK, and then, how do you see it panning out?
Thank you very much, Lindsay. And Marie, I think, was next. Marie Todd is the MSP, obviously. Marie, better be a good one.
No pressure.
Marie Todd from Easter Ross branch. We're reasonably confident that there is likely to be an independent referendum in the next few years, and I would expect that the Deputy Leader that we elect at the moment will see us through that period. I think one of the key questions that we need to address next time we have an independence referendum is the economy. And I'd be very interested in what the four of you think about how we should address that better. I think we're in a very different place now than we were in 2014. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on how we address that next time.
Okay, thank you, Marie. And the gentleman here, nicely dressed, if I can say so, yeah?
Spent all day like this, yes. All day doing the Scottish side.
We all do. Your name, please, and your card.
So, my name's Clark Goodison. I've just joined Sutherland branch. I've been abroad for many years, 4 years in England. Just came back to Scotland and joined Sutherland branch. I'd be interested, given that I was living in Somerset, quite close to Hinkley Point, I'd like to know the opinion of the panel on Hinkley Point versus renewable energy, which the British establishment are reducing investment in, but the Scottish Government want to increase the investment in it. Just generally, I'd like to know your views on those two subjects.
Yep. Thank you very much, Clark. So we've got Brexit outcomes, we've got the referendum and the economy, and we've got nuclear power versus renewables. Angus, can we start with you this time, please?
Sure. Lindsay, asking us to game the potential future weeks and months and get a crystal ball out. Well, who's it said there's the known knowns, there's the known unknowns, and then there's the unknown unknowns with some of these big questions. So let's deal with the known knowns that really matter. The UK government is going to have to initiate what's called the Article 50 procedure, which is the beginnings of negotiations between the UK and the European Union about how and when the UK should leave the European Union. That is time limited at 2 years. There's some argument about will it take longer or not, but it is of that order. Now, it seems to me that if we are a political party that voted and supports the case of Scotland remaining in the European Union, does it not make best sense for us that we never leave? Now, I support what Nicola Sturgeon has done. She's set up a commission. It's looking at, are there different ways of doing that? And perhaps there are different ways of doing that, and we should be open to that. But I know there's one way, for sure, that we can remain in the European Union, and that is that we remain in as a member state. And I think understanding that 2-year window is going to be key, because I think we will have to go some way. I think we're in the eye of the storm at the moment. There's almost a sense of, gosh, the UK voted to leave the EU, but the sky hasn't caved in yet. But I think that's because we're in the eye of the storm. And the minute negotiations start, and the minute the realities become clear, it's going to get very bumpy economically and politically. It's going to get very bumpy in terms of the UK's relationship with other EU countries. So I think it is going to be in that period, once the Article 50 procedure has started, that the political realities and dangers of the imminent leaving of the EU become clear to voters, that we'll begin to see a change in the political debate in Scotland. And now, the most important thing about all of this, because none of us actually have that crystal ball, I'd be surprised if any of my colleagues have a different view on this in terms of timescale and things. We knew there was going to be a referendum in 2014, in 2011. That's the point I was saying about going to Quebec and learning the lessons. We knew then that it was going to happen. 3 years later. What I'm saying to you is, it's entirely possible that we might have a referendum within 2. So the most important thing from that is, we shouldn't be considering doing things which take our eye off the ball about what we need to be doing, which is talking to voters, coming up with the updated policies that we require to go to these people to help persuade them, because it could be very, very soon. So that's the answer to the first question. Marie Todd on the economy, how should we address that? Well, firstly, we should get brainy people who are very good at the economy to look at the economy. I refer you to the honourable lady I spoke about earlier. And we have a great team of people, and they've asked for the input of party members. So please, if you've got views and expertise, email Kate, and it will go into the mix. And we will update how we help Scotland's economy grow, because we know oil is a finite resource. I think we should also be absolutely clear and honest to ourselves. There are a lot of people who are not yet convinced, who think our argument is entirely based on oil. We might know that to be wrong. It does not matter. That is their opinion. So we have to take that opinion seriously, and we have to make the persuasive case that Kate and colleagues are looking at. There's another point that I think that's quite important in all of this, is if you want to boil down one of the biggest single reasons why we lost the referendum, is that people in Scotland who had something, or thought they had something, whether it was a little pension pot, or a little saving, or a house that they inherited, or whatever it was, they largely felt that they were going to lose. And it is mission critical that we are able to explain to people that the independence that we seek for Scotland is the key to the door of this country being more economically successful and socially just. So again, very important from my perspective, let's not concentrate just on those that are convinced in the 45%. We must reach out to those people in the 55%, the 100% of Scotland, as I mentioned before, to convince them. And to Clark, you've just joined, well, welcome. You must be the 120,000
for years and years, but I just came back to Scotland 3 weeks ago.
Good. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. And I'm sure your colleagues here will make sure that you're signed up for the leafleting that's taking place next Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Look, I don't need to talk about this at great length. Hinkley Point, total waste of money. Money would have been much better invested in renewables. Not usually do reading tips for The Economist, but have a look what they had to say about it, about the numbers. The beauty is Scotland is home to 25% of all of Europe's renewable potential. One of the huge advantages of us becoming sovereign is that as a country we can get behind renewables in a way the Scottish Government has been able to do with its limited powers, but we'll be able to do that in a much more significant way. And I think this ties in with the previous question by Marie about making the economic case. Most countries in the world will give their eye teeth to have what we have, but we have to make sure that parts of the world, like here, or Orkney, and other parts of Scotland that do have tidal potential, wave potential, wind potential, we should make sure that these parts of the world profit, not the manufacturers of turbines in Denmark and Portugal and all the rest. So, yeah, Hinkley Point, waste of money, renewables, yes, let's make sure that the communities that actually produce it profit from it.
Thank you very much, Angus. Alyn.
Sure, on Lindsay's point about what's going to happen with Brexit, nobody knows. That's the problem. A number of slopey-shouldered Tories have made promises they cannot keep. That's one thing we do know. A number of posh boys who were over-promoted have now disappeared to go and spend their millions. This we do know. And we have a Prime Minister that we didn't vote for, with one member of the Westminster Parliament in Scotland who's now going to be making the decisions. So we are actually in a strong position on Brexit because we have been principled and pragmatic throughout. We didn't see the need for a special deal for dear old Blighty. We want to remain, we want to become independent, but we want our independent state to cooperate with other countries towards common endeavours. Because climate change, the refugee crisis, organised crime, people trafficking are way bigger than any one country. They're way bigger than Germany, they're bigger than France, they're bigger than dear old Blighty, they're bigger than independent Scotland, so we need to cooperate in that. And we face being ripped out of that. Now, by way of example about one of the things that we're doing to give the rest of the EU earness of our intent, one of the members of the Standing Council on Europe, David Martin, Labour MEP, credit to him, has put the party badges to one side and he's put a shoulder to the wheel. David and myself are over to The Hague in a few weeks' time to go and meet the head of Europol, because Scotland faces the prospect of being taken out of Europol, which is how the police share intelligence on organised crime and terrorism and keeping us safe. So we're going over to talk about, well, how can Scotland stay in? Regardless of what the future is, we want to stay, you don't want to lose us, and we are incredibly strategic, especially for maritime things, as you know, around here. We want to remain. So we keep that discussion going, we keep that discussion vocal. Scotland will not go silent, which is where I reiterate my point, we need someone who can continue that discussion and maintain that focus, because we've got the A-team on Brexit right now, but government's tough. Holding the Westminster government to account is tough. And events, dear boy, events. As things happen, that focus might shift. I can maintain that. I can maintain the visibility of those issues. I can keep the information coming to you guys. If you're not signed up for my Friday email, sign up for my Friday email and share it. Keep the information going. We will keep you informed on that. And let's not tie our hands about anything to do with Brexit, because anything can happen. But we are in actually a strong position on this. And in the wider European Union, we can be the good news story that the EU needs. So status is something that we can be working on. On the timing of IndyRef new, Maria, I wouldn't predict anything, but we need to be ready for whatever it's going to be. And what we do know right now is that it's going to involve speaking to an awful lot of the people of Scotland. I would contend, while we dust off our policy discussion to get the ideas into what the proposition's eventually going to be, as we see clarity coming through about what Brexit Britain, bargain basement Brexit Britain, actually is, and what we'll be independent from. So we need to keep that discussion going within Scotland, we need to maintain a strong awareness of what's going on down south, and we need to prepare the ground in the wider European context as well. But above all else, we need to talk to the people of Scotland. And we've got this to see where people are, to actually reach out and say, well, how do you feel? What do you want to talk about? Because while we're getting the proposition ready, let's see what they want to hear and what they want to talk about. And we can do that right now. That's absolutely crucial. And on the economic policy, the First Minister's established the Growth Commission under Andrew Wilson, as we've heard. I think that'll throw up a lot of ideas. I think we've got the ideas within the party as well that we can discuss publicly. On Clark's point, you're not going to get a lot of difference across the four of us on just how daft, in every possible sense, Hinkley Point is. It's also illegal under EU law, incidentally, to give that much state aid to one industry rather than the others. I was on the Energy Committee for 5 years, Industry Research and Energy Committee, for 5 years over the water. I see Rob Gibson there, who's been pushing the cause of renewables for a long, long time. We could re-industrialise Scotland. Now, petrochem has a place in Scotland's energy mix going forwards, but we also, and future generations will look at us agog that we took this precious finite resource and we burned it to move ourselves and goods around the place. We get fertilisers, we get plastics from petrochem, that can continue, but we do need to get the plans in place for a post-carbon economic future for Scotland. And we've got every possible advantage it's possible to have. And the technology gets better all the time. Look at how fast these have evolved. There's more technology in this than ran the moon landing. Renewables technology is moving at exactly the same rate. And what we must do is make sure that Scotland remains the centre of innovation, not just the Klondike on this. Because the idea that we're just sticking up turbines that are put up by jobbing Romanians turning screwdrivers, that's not an economic model for Scotland. We need the smart stuff, we need the clever stuff. We need EMEC at Orkney in spades all over the country. And if that takes EU money, if that takes public money, well, we need to get it moving and get it started and establish what we need to do. Because we could reindustrialise Scotland and really make Scotland the clean, green energy powerhouse of the European Union. Whatever happens, we're still going to have power lines that we can sell the stuff. So we'll get huge advantages in renewables, absolutely. I'm sure we all agree on that.
Thank you, Alyn. And Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I won't try and out-Europe Alyn on his analysis of where we are with Europe and Brexit, but I think it's important to remember that we lost the referendum. The democratic will of the Scottish people was a no vote, so that's why we're not independent. The democratic will of the Scottish people was that we remain in Europe, and that's why we're the democratic elected government and our democratic elected First Minister is exploring every single possibility to keep us in Europe. So when we get to a point that she can't keep us in Europe, in the existing system of the United Kingdom, that's perhaps when a question will be asked to the Scottish people of what do you want in the future? Do you want to just stay part of the United Kingdom out with Europe, or do you want to be an independent country with the potential to be in Europe and do so much more? And Marie, on the economy, the Americans had a saying back in the 80s, it's the economy stupid. Elections were always won and lost in America on the economy, and we've seen that come over to this part of the world as well. UK elections are won and lost on the economy. So we lost the referendum, so does that perhaps mean our economic argument wasn't good enough? Perhaps so. But I think Angus highlights that we are positive in our vision, but we need to be negative when it comes to highlighting the failings. The United Kingdom, who are the overall masters of the British economy. £200 billion wasted on renewing weapons of mass destruction. Nearly £50 billion wasted taking us to an illegal war in Iraq. How damaging is that to the economy? And then there's Alistair Darling. All we heard from him is Plan B. What is Plan B? Where's Alistair Darling and his Plan B? As the pound has plummeted over the summer. Have you went on holiday? You've seen just how little you got for your pound. So that argument on the economy has changed, because the argument on the pound has changed. The pound of 2014 isn't the pound of 2016. I think people in Scotland, they don't care what currency they've got in their pocket as long as they've got plenty of it. That's the point. We can handle euros, we can handle any currency. And Angus says earlier on he's in favour of a Scottish pound. I'm in favour of whatever the party members and the party decide is our policy on currency, and we'll promote that policy going forward. And the economy leads us on to Hinkley Point. £18 billion. That's the cost at Hinkley Point. And where does the money go? It goes to EDF, a state-owned French company. So the French taxpayer benefits for £18 billion. And where else does it go? To the Chinese. The security of this country is in the hands of another country in terms of a nuclear reactor being built in China and coming to Hinkley Point. It's absurd. It's a threat to national security. Theresa May is a threat to national security. So let's park the nuclear issue, whether you're pro-nuclear or anti-nuclear, and look at the finance. 3 times the wholesale price is what the government is going to pay. I'm an electrician, by the way. 3 times the wholesale price per megawatt until 2060. It's absolutely absurd. What other industry would get 3 times the going rate to do their job? None. Whereas that money, the £18 billion, as other chaps are saying, we could use that money to invest in renewables. This is nothing more than a ploy to buy votes in the southeast of England. It'll create 25,000 jobs in the southeast, it'll create none in the north of England, it'll create none in Wales, it'll create none in Scotland. There'll be no secondary work in terms of logistics or transportation or manufacturing construction, because that'll get done in China, and there'll be no profit, because the profit will go to the French taxpayer, and that's why they get better public services than us. So that's the economy. Bad economic decisions, money wasted, billions in illegal weapons of mass destruction, billions in illegal wars, and billions, as Alyn's just informed us, in illegal nuclear power stations.
Thank you very much, Chris. Tommy.
So the referendum that we had 2 years ago tomorrow is very much unfinished business. I'm convinced that there will be a second referendum. Up until a few months ago, I had thought that would probably be in the 2020s at the earliest. But what has happened on the 23rd of June with Brexit is that it has created the possibility, and I put it no stronger than that, the possibility that there may be a referendum earlier than that within the next 2 or 3 years. Whether there is or not is not inevitable. It depends on a number of things. It firstly depends on whether we can come up with some proposal short of independence that allows people in Scotland to keep their Scottish passports while people in England and Wales lose theirs, and that is acceptable to the British government. Now those are quite big hypotheticals. If that doesn't happen, and if the British government rules out any special arrangements for Scotland, we may then be left in a position where there is only one clear way to do that, and that is to become an independent European nation ourselves. At that stage, I think we'll all have to make a judgment as to whether or not there is an appetite for that referendum and people want to go ahead with it. Because everyone in this room wants a second bite at the cherry. We all want a second referendum, but nobody in this room wants to lose it. And we need to actually talk to people and make sure that there is an appetite and a hunger to go ahead to win a campaign on this if we are looking at that shorter time scale. Now, one of the things that's very important in order to do that is how we go forward from today onwards in looking at the options and considering them. And that's why I'm very keen that we should be reaching out to other organisations, starting with the network that we had in the 2014 referendum, but bringing in other people and saying, look, what do you think we should do now? The world has changed. What are your options? And if we can bring people with us, new layers of people who went with us last time, to a realisation that the best way to protect Scotland and the best way to protect their lives going forward is now to have a second referendum, then we will be in a much stronger basis to campaign and win for that. So the work we do now, I believe, going forward in looking at this murkiness that is ahead of us is very, very important, and the more people we involve, the better. On the economy, I think the economy is one of the areas where we were vulnerable last time, to be honest. I think we're still vulnerable. I mean, it annoys me that we're not responding robustly enough every time the GERS figures come out and people say, oh, there's this massive deficit in Scotland's finances, you're a basket case, etc., etc. We need to have a very robust proposition on the economics of independence. We need to say how much we intend to spend to fund the type of country we believe we want to create. We need to say how we're going to raise that money. And if there is a gap, we need to say how we will manage that deficit and how we will grow ourselves out of it. And unless we can get a convincing proposition on that, I don't think we will get a lot of the people who were not persuaded last time to be persuaded. So the work that Kate and her colleagues are doing in this commission is of absolutely vital importance. And I hope that as that work goes forward, we can develop structures and processes inside the party which allow all of us to discuss these things, all of us to make an input, not just sending off an email, but actually having focused discussions and decision making over a period of time, which arrives at a new economic prospectus for our independence. In terms of Hinkley Point, let me say this, I think like a lot of people, I got engaged in politics initially through a single issue that I was passionately concerned about, and then having got involved in that, I realised there was a bigger perspective, and I signed up for the whole thing. My issue was nuclear power, and I had quite an emotional moment earlier this week when I realised that I was asking about Hinkley Point and the expansion of nuclear power stations, asking in a way which made clear my opposition to it in the House of Commons, and it was 40 years almost to the day that I, as a teenage schoolboy, had joined Friends of the Earth and signed up for the campaign against the Windscale reprocessing plant, which some of you will remember. And it was a little moment of, I don't know, it was a little emotional moment to realise that 40 years on from getting involved in that campaign, here was I in the House of Commons demanding an answer from the Secretary of State on this ridiculous proposition. The sad point was that 40 years on, government policy hasn't actually changed, and they're still arguing for a ridiculous nuclear-based energy policy for the United Kingdom. I am so glad that we do not have that in Scotland and that we are able to focus on sensible alternatives. You know, we know now that even with the bogus mathematics that has been used to calculate the cost of electricity that Hinkley will produce, and I say bogus because it does not fully take into account the decommissioning costs and the storage of nuclear waste that will be produced at it. But even if you take that figure, we know already that within the lifespan of the Hinkley reactor, renewable alternatives will be cheaper per megawatt. The case is unanswerable for switching our entire focus to developing renewable energy. And we are lucky in this country. We didn't just have the oil rush, we've now got a second energy rush. We have on our shores 25% of the entire European continent's potential in terms of tidal and wave energy. So I want to see us focus dramatically seeking to become the renewables capital of Europe. I want to see a state national renewable energy corporation which will be able to raise funds and direct investment and invest in things that the private sector won't do because you only get the gains in the long term. And I'd like to see us develop a new industrial strategy in this country where we build the underwater turbines that we're going to need in Jura or Shetland or other places around our coast in order to generate electricity from the water that is all around us. That will be absolutely key to our success, and it should be front and centre of our case for independence.
Thank you all very much indeed. Time is marching on. Ahead of this event, I did put out a call for questions by email for those people that couldn't attend. So one very quick, or it's not a very quick question, but if you'd answer it very quickly. This is from Donald in Sutherland branch. Scotland's rural communities are suffering and we need that to be recognised. How will you support us in North West Sutherland when everything seems to be focused on the central belt? Very quickly. If we can have Alyn first, please.
Sure. I've worked with and for Scotland's farmers on the Agriculture Committee since 2007. Without EU support, 1 in 3 Scottish farms goes bankrupt. So that's people coming off the land, that's people continuing the destocking, which is still going in the wrong direction. That's fewer people in the support industries, that's fewer people in the wider ancillary economy. Without active farming, without profitable active farming, there isn't a future for rural Scotland. The economic bedrock of rural Scotland is agriculture. And we can do things with tourism, we can do things with other stuff, but farming's it. And the Scottish Government, since 1999, all of them, have prioritised agriculture in a way that Westminster is just never going to do. And working with the European framework, we've been able to get support into the rural economy via the Common Agricultural Policy, and we now face losing that. But there's a lot of things that we can also do in terms of empowering local communities to take more account of their governance. Highland Council being a vast area to cover, and one of the things that's being brought forward within the Glasgow Manifesto, certainly for the local elections, is participative budgetary setting, which puts more people locally in charge of some spending decisions, which empowers communities, which would see a lot more people brought into the decision-making process. But the idea that rural communities are not doing as well as they need to is an indictment of where Scotland is. And it's ultimately a sign of the failure of Westminster's stewardship of our economy nationally and rurally. And the Scottish Government, given all the tools that we need, will be able to prioritise growth across the whole of Scotland. Taking a leaf out of Ireland's book, where they had an all-Ireland growth strategy. It wasn't just about Dublin, it was about decentralisation of government, it was about decentralisation of economic stimulus. All of these powers we need, and that's why we need to be the independent country we all aspire to be. And within this party, there's absolutely no dispute that we are one Scotland. I don't like the politics of division. I don't like to hear about old or new members. I don't like to hear about north or south, or urban or rural. Now that's my own experience, having represented the whole of the country. Island, mainland, up and down the place since 2004. We are one party and we are one nation, and we all need to share in each other's success. And we're not doing as well as we need to do. And that's why we must be the independent state that we all aspire to be.
Okay, I try not to create differences where they don't exist as well. I think that many of the problems that we have are national problems. They take effect in a different way in many of our rural areas. Sometimes actually much worse if you look at the problems, the stress of our health service, our transport, or the cost of housing in some rural communities. It's far worse than it is in the inner city. So I suppose the way I would look at this is saying that as we develop our national policy as a party, as we build our prospectus for the new Scotland, we need to make absolutely sure that the special characteristics and the needs of rural communities and of island communities are taken into account when we do that. So that if we have an industrial strategy, it's got to have something to say about investment in those areas. If we have a target for social housing, there's got to be targets in those areas. If we have a policy on national transport, it's got to be reflected in those areas. And for me, the way to make sure that the local priorities can be set and differences from one region to another can be properly identified is to build up our regional structure inside our party, to actually give members much more influence and say at a local level and a regional level, so that regional priorities can be set, regional policies can be set as well. I believe if we do that, we can get away from a one-size-fits-all mentality and make sure that our national policies are implemented on the ground in the most effective way everywhere.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Angus, please.
Well, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I don't know about you, but when I joined the SNP, I joined a party that I thought wanted us to exercise power as close to the communities that we live in, whether urban or rural, whichever part of Scotland we're in. I'm not sure everybody out there believes that. And I don't know about you, but I want to make sure that in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years, people do believe that. And that's why at the recent away day of parliamentarians, those of us that represent Highland and Island regional constituencies, which includes Moray in this sense, we came together and we talked about that. And I think that's a really, really good sign. It's not the first time we've met, so there's no need for more initiatives to bring us together. We are working together, we are discussing the narratives that really matter. And when I hear people say that we don't like talking about urban and rural, well, I'm sorry, we have to. We have to. Because the realities of Central Belt Scotland cannot be compared with that of rural Sutherland. We are talking about a part of the country which is, in many senses, continuing to go through the clearances. Now that is a problem. Now, that is a problem that some people think is historic. It's not. It is still a problem now. Now, thank goodness we have an SNP government, and issues like connectivity are really, really important. And yes, it's absolutely right that we need to get the cutting-edge technology delivered to every single house in Scotland. But when the SNP says that we are going to connect 100% of Scotland, I know which part of Scotland is going to be at 98 or 99% and which is going to be at 1 or 2%. And it's going to be places like Sutherland, and it will include places in the likes of Moray too. And so for us, this really, really matters. And we can't just shove it under the carpet and say, because apparently it causes division to talk about the different realities in Scotland, I'm sorry, it's not good enough. And part of the reason why it's not good enough is that the party has not been focused enough nationally in putting some oomph behind our efforts in parts of the world like this. Now, two of my colleagues here are on the National Executive Committee of the party. They are part of the decision-making of the party, and in recent years it has not been good enough. If I'm elected as Depute Leader, when it comes to consideration for the manifesto, a job for the Depute Leader, and when it comes to making sure that our materials, which can be brought before the National Executive Committee of the party, they need to stand the test of, yes, working in urban Scotland, but working in rural Scotland too. It's been forgotten about for too long.
Thank you, Angus, and finally Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I know you did say briefly, but I don't want people to think that it is a brief matter. I mean, we've had a Depute Leader that has came from rural Scotland continuously for over a decade, whether it was Alex Salmond or John Swinney. So I don't think electing a new Depute Leader, whether they come from urban Scotland or rural Scotland, necessarily means we're going to see gains for rural Scotland. I mean, I come from a housing scheme in Greenock, but for me child poverty is as much child poverty in urban housing scheme Greenock as it is here in Tain. Unemployment's the same in Greenock as it is in Tain. I mean, these issues are common issues across Scotland. There might be different factors that cause the issues, but the commonality of the issue is the same across Scotland. So I don't think we should divide it into the plight of somebody living in poverty in Greenock is any different from the plight of somebody living in poverty up here, or the fact that a young person in Port Glasgow can't get a mortgage is any different from the fact that a young person in Angus can't get a mortgage. So we've got Marie, we've got Kate, we've got Paul, we've got Angus, we've got first-class representatives representing rural Scotland. We've got Angus Brendan McNeill in the Western Isles, we've got Brendan Ara in Argyll. We've got a team for the first time in a long time that represents the Scottish Parliament and the UK Parliament. So I want to see better partnership working, and next year we can take that to the next level. At the moment we've got 32 independent councillors in Highland, only 20 SNP councillors, and there's long been a battle, there's long been a question of how do we go and take the argument to the independents to win the votes? Well, there's enough Lib Dem votes and enough Labour votes in the 20 other councils that we can take votes from, but we need to deliver for local communities. Angus is right, not on national manifestos, but on local issues by local people. That's the whole point of local democracy. So when we fight an election in Tain on Tain issues, or we fight an election in Moray, am I pronouncing it wrong? Sorry.
No, we're just not talking
Sorry,
about
Sullivan.
Okay.
Tain is rural. It's not.
Right, okay, sorry. Apologies for that. So anyway, the point is we're fighting local elections on local issues. So we want to win in 2017, and we want to get a new team at SNP councils, take control of Highland Council, we've got control of Aberdeenshire Council, we've got control of other large councils that represent large geographical areas. It can be done, but we can't do it if we keep fighting local elections on national manifestos. So we need a local manifesto for this area and the 31 other 30, of the 32 areas in Scotland, so that we can take control. And when we work in partnership, whether it's your MP and Paul or Angus, your local councillor, I don't think it's the job of a deputy leader to come up and produce policy ideas for how to improve rural Scotland. Apologies if you think it is. It's the job of the party to produce policy, not the deputy leader. It's the job of the elected parliamentarians and councillors to promote the policy of the party and deliver change for people that live in this area.
Thank you very much, Chris. Now we're going to move to the summing up, and Alyn has 2 minutes to sum up, please. Thank you, Alyn.
Well, Paul, thanks very much, and thank you all for coming along. It's been a good round the houses this evening. You've got a decision to make. It's an exciting process to be part of, and we're at an exciting time, a unique time in Scotland's political history. Brexit has changed the weather. We've got great teams at Holyrood, we've got great teams at Westminster, we're going to have great teams across local government as well, augmented in the challenges of the upcoming election. But I can do a unique role. I can be the ambassador for Scotland, preparing the ground for whatever is coming in Scotland's future, and I can explain and maintain the focus on whatever Brexit is going to be within our country, continuing to travel the length and breadth of Scotland, as I always have and I always will. We have a unique opportunity. I'm not part of the Scottish Government, that's the point. I can support their efforts while maintaining focus upon the defining issue of our age. I can enthusiastically encourage changing how the party does things with others to make sure that we're ready for the challenges ahead. I can lead by example and be out and about campaigning, starting with this, speaking to the people of Scotland about what they want to see us deliver. We've a unique opportunity. Now is not the time for business as usual. The reason why you choose the Depute Leader, rather than the leader chooses the Depute Leader, is because it's about what the leader needs, what the cause needs, and the times we live in. I believe the European question is the defining attribute of politics in these islands. I can maintain that focus and augment my role for Scotland, for the cause, and I can deliver. I told the European Parliament that Scotland didn't let you down. I won't let this party down, if you'll have me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alyn. Tommy, please, 2 minutes to sum up.
So, folks, you're all members of the SNP. You can go home tonight and look in the members' website, look at the rule book, and you will find a definition of what Depute Leader is. It's very brief. It just says to deputise for the leader, no surprises there, and to prepare the manifesto. Which is why you have 4 candidates in front of you this evening in this contest, each trying to put their interpretation on what the job is. And as just been heard, this is not a job that is appointed by the leader, unlike some other posts in the party. It's not a job that's selected by parliamentarians. This is a post that is elected by you, the mass membership. So you need to decide what job you want done and what you think the priorities are. I hope you will agree with me that our priority at the minute is to try and realise the potential of this phenomenal membership surge we have had, to try and take advantage of this remarkable political opportunity that we have. And in order to do that, things need to change. We need to refocus how we organise, we need to train and educate our members better, we need to provide more staff to back up the efforts of volunteers, and we need to involve many, many more members in making policy. I think if we do that, we can turn from not only just being the most successful political party in Europe, which we are, we can become truly a remarkable political force, the like of which this country has never seen. You have an opportunity in this election to expand rather than stretch our current leadership team. I hope you will do that by adding me to it. please vote Tommy, number 1.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Angus, 2 minutes, please, to sum up.
Thank you very much, and to all of you for coming along. This being the Democratic SNP, the good news is you can vote for all of us, because it's a 1, 2, 3, 4 election. I'm asking you to vote for me number 1, and the reason, in the main, is I think at this important time you need to know that you're electing the person with the most experience and a track record of delivery, and I humbly believe that I am that person. All of us on this table agree that we need to do more on organisation. We need to do more in local government. We can and must seize the European initiative. But this is not an election for the vice-convener organisation of the SNP. We already have a post in the party that's responsible for it. That's not the Deputy Leader. We already have a post in the Scottish National Party called Vice-Convener Local Government. This is not the election for that post. This is the election for Depute Leader. And we also have fantastic spokespeople in the European Parliament, in Westminster and the Scottish Parliament. This is not about electing another European spokesperson. This is about electing somebody to be the depute to our leader and First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. And it seems to make perfect sense to me that that should bring together our leader in the Scottish Parliament and our leader at Westminster. It will obviously be a male-female balanced ticket, but it seems to me of real importance and significance that our leadership reflects Scotland. Urban Scotland, rural Scotland. The parts of Scotland where we fight Labour, the parts of Scotland where we still fight the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. I'm the only candidate who's been our party's national campaign director. I'm the only candidate who's been the party's business convener. Thousands of members are already supporting me and councillors, and more than 90% of the SNP's declared parliamentarians say they're voting for me. So if you want somebody with experience that has the trust of their colleagues, please vote Angus, number 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angus. And Chris, 2 minutes to sum up, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me up. It was a great experience. We are the party of independence. That's why I'm standing in this contest, because we won't get independence if the party of independence doesn't win elections. 2012 showed us, despite a historic mandate with an SNP majority government, we failed to win council elections across Scotland. Now, regardless of Brexit, regardless of its success in 2015 and 2016, if we don't take control of local authorities across this country in May next year, we will not progress the case for independence. So that's why I'm here, to bring local government to the table. But when we deliver that louder voice for local government at the heart of our party, we then need to start delivering for local government. Because people are fickle in this country, and if we take control of councils across the country, then regardless of we have a monopoly on MPs, we have a majority of MSPs nearly, it does not matter if we get the basic decisions wrong, if we get it wrong in education, if we get it wrong in roads, if we get it wrong in healthcare, if we get it wrong in community facilities. So we need somebody at the heart of the SNP for the first time in this party's history that lives and breathes local government, so that we can achieve parity of esteem in this country, and no longer have a system will review local government as a tier or a level under national government, but an equal partner working together with the Scottish Government, not against the Scottish Government as we see councils across this country do. A new partnership that will deliver for Scotland, because when we deliver for Scotland and when people put their trust in us, whether it's a reserved matter or a devolved matter or a local council matter, when they trust us to deliver, they will trust us to deliver independence. That's why I'm standing here. I'm not asking you to give me your first preference vote, I'm asking you to give local government your first preference vote, and I'm asking you to give yourself your first preference vote by having a louder voice for party members, a deputy leader with the time, because he lives and works in this country, you actually get to branch meetings and listen to what you have to say and take it back to the very heart of our party. Thank you.
Thank you all very much indeed. I'm going to hand over to Tain branch in just a moment so that they can do the raffle, so don't rush away please. And don't rush away either, because in this room tonight we've got more councillors. There's Graham there from Sutherland, we've got Chris obviously from Inverclyde Council, we've got Kate and we've got Marie who are MSPs. Unfortunately Gail's not here this evening because she's speaking at an event at North Island College and sends her apologies. We obviously have MPs here as well, and we have an MEP. So stay behind just a little while and take the chance to speak to all of these politicians that the people of Scotland have elected. I'd remind you as well, we would like donations for the room hire if possible, and there's still time to buy a raffle ticket probably. I've drawn your attention to the fact that we're fighting a by-election at this time as well. Culloden and Ardor in Inverness. Holly Munro is our candidate, and she's looking for campaigners. So if you'd like to get involved in the campaign, get one of these leaflets, they're in the room. Marie will sort you out with one of them also. And I think with that we shall conclude. And what I would like...
Sorry, could I just make a point? It's Michael Simpson, Sutherland branch, in the northwest bit. I profoundly disagree with Chris about the position of the...
Sorry, Mike. Please, no, we have to wind up. What I would suggest you do is you take it out with Chris at the end of the meeting, please. We must
All I
wrap
want
up.
to do is invite whoever gets elected to Northwest Sutherland and come, it doesn't matter how high you are in the party, to come to Northwest Sutherland and see some of the issues that were raised this evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. With that, can I have a big round of applause for the candidates? I'll tell you that it's not easy to do a Hustings, and these 4 individuals have travelled thousands of miles now all over Scotland, and we're enormously grateful that they've taken the time and the trouble and the inconvenience to come to Tain to speak to all of us. So a round of applause for them.